Good evening, everybody. This one is going to be a bit of a weird video, a very weird video. Of course, you're seeing a Bitcoin chart, and I'm driving home. As promised, I was going to talk about some stuff, and there was a few suggestions. I didn't really know what to talk about. One of our members, KR, he mentioned a whole bunch of stuff, including Antarctica, aliens, ancient civilizations. Everything we know is, we're being lied to, and all so and so forth, right? So many different things. So I picked a subject, and I said I will talk about ancient civilizations. Now, I'm not editing this or anything like this. This is going to be a video as it is, and at the end of it, maybe we might even talk about Bitcoin. But right now, let's talk about ancient civilizations, right? Now, when we're talking about ancient civilizations, we're talking about some of the very, very old stuff, some of the megalithic structures that we see, some of those theoretical ancient civilizations that have pre-existed modern civilizations, right? When we talk about modern civilizations, we're talking about like 6,000 years ago, the ancient Sumerians and this and that. That's what we're talking about, right? The ones that have been told by our authoritarian scientific, whatever you want to call them, what are they, like, I don't even know what the word is, right? It's so funny because they're organizations. These are random people who come together and agree that they are the authority on it, right? And this is the problem, right? We have authorities in ancient history, Egyptian history. We have authorities on everything, right? Scientific authorities, right? There's only a handful of academics who agree that this is the case, and once they all agree to it, then that becomes some sort of a fact, even though it's mostly theories. So I can go into a whole rant with this, but I don't want to. Let's talk about the ancient civilizations that I want to talk about, right? So we know we have these megalithic structures which kind of defy what the ancient civilizations or ancient prehistoric people, I would call them prehistoric because some of these are dated way before 6,000, 6,500 years ago. So some of these structures that you find, for example, in Bolivia, Pumapunku, Tiwanaku, a few other places like South America, XYZ, even ancient Egypt itself, right? So when we start talking about these, we start looking at these structures and we take for granted what is given to us. Like, okay, the pyramids in Egypt are only 4,500 years old, according to mainstream science, right? However, there are evidence that show that these are way before, in fact, there are so many contradictions and so many misleading information. It's just there to confuse the life out of you. So, for example, I'll give you a really good example, right? So, next to one of the Great Pyramids, they found a particular stone with some carvings on it in 3 specific writing, right? So it had some ancient Aramaic or Hebrew, I can't remember. It had some Greek and it had some of the hieroglyphics. So everyone decided to call it the Rosetta Stone, right? That means that we can read Greek, for example. So we can translate that whatever's written there may be in Greek, right? Or, maybe is a translation, or Hebrew, for example. So we can take that and say that's a translation. 3 different languages wrote that. So we know that whatever these words are, they can be translated into whatever the hieroglyphics are. Look, let's be honest with ourselves, right? What if these actual writing was done in different ages or different times, different eras? Nobody's thought about that. What if they're not translations? They're just messages left by each one. However, of course, when you take 2 languages and they're talking the same thing, maybe it's true. Maybe this is exactly what it is. I'm just going to be doubtful on that one. And I'll say, okay, fair play. This is exactly what it might be. But then one of the biggest problems you have is the time that they were trying to translate this particular language, they needed to use the Rosetta Stone. And yet there were millions or hundreds of thousands, I mean, if that's what they want to go with, right, of people living in Egypt who had no idea what the hieroglyphics were. Now that's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? That you have a civilization that's been living there for thousands of years, right? Descendants of them, right? Living there for thousands and thousands of years, who don't know what the language is. that becomes really, really weird, doesn't it, right? And it just continues because these people have no idea what it was, and they're supposed to be the descendants of the ancient Egyptians, right? And it just doesn't make any sense. I mean, of course, they're probably peasants who had no idea what they want. They're uneducated, and this is one of the reasons. Or we could say that other civilizations or other cultures from different parts of the world decided to go and live in ancient Egypt, and Egypt was abandoned. Absolutely, there was no one there. This is one of the reasons why the language was lost. So we needed the Rosetta Stone, right? That's just part one of what I'm about to say to you. That's one. So then we have the buildings itself, right? The actual megalithic buildings itself. We have these stone blocks, you know, millions and millions of stone blocks, right? Each one weighing tons and tons and tons. And we have these hypotheses that people, you know, hundreds of men got together, pulled it, you know, with ropes and whatnot, logs and you name it, whatever, and they've, you know, built these structures. In fact, they got the stones 500 miles away, and they used the River Nile to somehow get on a barge or whatever. Great. I mean, and there's been people out there, scientific evidence, or trying to show scientific evidence. They tried to reenact this and say, well, this is how it was done. Okay, I'll take it with a pinch of salt, but regardless whether it was done in a particular way or not, with hundreds of people, because people were just free, you know, in those days, right? You had, you know, cheap labor, or you had complete free labor because you had slaves and everything, so you could get them to do whatever you want, right? And then the only thing you could think of is building these megalithic structures with a tiny room inside, or maybe 1 or 2 rooms, or maybe even if you're lucky, you get 3 or 4 rooms inside. So that's all you do. You just build this, right? You know, the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, and everybody else's chamber, right? Which is okay, right? You know, because that's what kings do, right? You go around, you build a whole bunch of pyramids, and you do these things. And you build you know, these mega large ones. You build the first one, which is the oldest one, which was the step pyramid, and you couldn't get it right. So then somebody else came along, another generation, whatnot, and then decided to build the first ones, and then they did it, right? So all of this, you know, just makes sense, right? You know, and I'm being sarcastic here. I hope you understand this. It doesn't, because they've got better things to do. I mean, if you are such a powerful, what do you call this, king or queen or emperor, whatever you want to call it, right, of this nation, well, I'll tell you where you would put your labor. And this is very simple, right? You would put your labor in your home. You would build the biggest palaces, not your tomb. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Yet we have pyramids left over by these, you know, these crazy kings, queens, whatever you want to call them, like these, you know, pharaohs who decided to be gods or whatever they wanted to be. They built these things that their afterlife was more important than their current life, you know. And yet most of them didn't even last that long, right? They were each trying to kill each other. They were at each other's necks. So it doesn't make any sense. It's like, why would you do this? And then there's very few. So when you see the dynasties, you see so many different ages, so many different emperors, so many different kings, whatever, or pharaohs, or whatever you want to call them. But the point is there's very few pyramids. So what happened? Did they just stop building, or did they have this craze once they had to build it? It's like, who can build the biggest? Or was it something else? Or did these people actually inherit these things? And I'm going to go with inheritance because way before that, right? And I don't care if scientists date it or not, the Nubians, right, who were the original residents of that particular zone, that particular area, they were already building pyramids. Now, the pyramids they were building were a load of them, right? They were building tons of pyramids, smaller ones, manageable pyramids. Well, what if we give them the credit and say, well, one of them may have turned around and decided to build some massive, large pyramid and leave it there? That would make sense. But then we're giving the credit to them, right? You know, we can't, right? So whoever discovered the pyramids, right, even though the pyramids are already there, so there's nothing to be discovered, because thousands of people before the person who officially discovered it has already seen it. And in fact, one of the other facts is, this is really, really good, right? when they went and found the pyramids, there were only some part of it was poking out of the sand. So you had these tons and tons of sand there, right? And then this thing was sitting underneath, and that's how they found it. You know, I mean, how much more weird and how much more BS can you really sell someone, right? So that's what's going on. Anyway, so the Nubians have been known to build many, and there's tons and tons of pyramids there to prove it, right? And they built these altars, or whatever you want to call them, right? These tombs for their thing. That makes sense. Like small pyramid for one person, many of them. Sometimes, you know, you get 3 or 4 clusters with all of them together. Made sense. And I could even imagine one of them to come around and say, right, I'm going to build one of the biggest ones. Makes sense. But saying that the ancient Egyptians built it and spent all their resources and spent years, like 20 years, 30 years, whatever years they spent in building these things, I think that these guys had to be completely insane and, you know, had nothing better to do, right? You know, you could, the manpower you would use to build these things, you could go and conquer countries, you know, conquer continents, right? But no, that's not what happened. They built pyramids out of all the things that they could do, right? And yet when the pyramids were discovered, there was not a single mummy or anything inside one of them. The only one that they found was King Tutankhamun's, and that's the one that connects everything, right? Well, what says King Tutankhamun just didn't inherit one, or just didn't decide to just take one over, right? But anyway, that's a different story. Now, the thing that people are missing, right, is you've got these dates. Now, the pyramids are 4,500 years old, or if you go back to other parts of the country or other parts of the world, for example, there are other structures that have been built 4,500, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. If you go to Turkey, for example, Göbekli Tepe, that's like 12,500 or something like this, right? There's recently another one discovered, 27,000 years, right? But one thing that's constantly coming up is there are shapes and, you know, like, you know, kind of like an early hieroglyphic type of a thing that's actually showing up on these stones, these stone carvings. I'll call them stone carvings because even the hieroglyphics are technically stone carvings, right? So you got these, you know, imperfect stone carvings. Maybe they're imperfect because they're dated, or maybe they used to be a lot better, but you've got these, you know, stone carvings and stone structures, you know, again, the weight and everything just, like, you know, is very similar, and people are not connecting those dates. What if, right, all of humanity at some stage on this very planet had the same knowledge? I'm not talking about technology, because that's just the weirdest thing ever. Technology, right? You know, people always trying to connect, and they try and compare the technology from now to you know, 3,500, 4,000 years ago. Guys, you can't compare the technology from now to like 5 decades ago. So what's wrong with you? I mean, did you forget Moore's law? So how could we even compare? We can't. But what we are forgetting is that rather than comparing, why can't we just say that the technology back then could have been far more superior, far more cleaner, far more advanced than what we have now? Now, what is advanced to us, right now would probably be magic to us back in the days, you know? Because think about it, what if we had electricity but without burning fossil fuel? Because that's the, you know, how could you have electricity if you're not burning fossil fuel? Well, what if they didn't have to burn fossil fuel? You know, what if we didn't have to? These are questions people are not asking, right? So, you know, what if they had electricity? What if they had wireless electricity? You know, because again, you know, when we look at the pyramids, for example, is a very good one. It's an enclosed building or structure, and yet when you look at the ceilings, there is no smoke, signs of smoke or anything, like, you know, when you have soot come out of flames, right? So you have this residue remaining. There is absolutely no residue. So I mean, they got to be geniuses to work with this, or literally have magic, right? Now that's possible, right? Because there are plenty of magical stories out there, you know, flying carpets and whatnot. But anyway, we leave that aside. But again, these are mythical, legendary, whatever, fairy tales, right? But the point is there are enough evidence to say that people had the same knowledge, or across the globe, everybody had the same knowledge. The knowledge they had was how to build these megalithic structures right? And have great knowledge of cutting stone. And I'm not talking about cutting stone with bronze or iron or whatever. No, years before that, thousands of years before that, because we can see we've got structures with the similar kind of build or quality or weight or the material that they used date back thousands of years. So we don't have an accurate date. We can go all the way from like 2,000 years all the way back to like 27,000 years currently, right? So if we use this database and we say, okay, we put an average of like midway, we'd say like average is like 12,000 years. Well, 12,000 years ago, they had something to cut stones. It's very simple. So if they had something to cut stones, and if they were able to build with stone, just think about that, right? They definitely had something. So that's what I'm saying. I'm saying they shared the knowledge and they were building with the same kind of technology. And I'm not talking about ancient aliens or this Atlanteans or whatever. No, why would we want to go to Atlanteans for? Why can't Atlanteans just be a myth, right? For me, Atlanteans could just be a myth, because as far as I'm concerned, right, there were societies and civilizations who would have had technology or would have had knowledge of doing certain things. Now, there could be other hypotheses. I could even say, well, maybe humanity or man, were actually giants. They were living longer. They had better climate, better everything. And they were able to, for them, like what we have today, like a 1 ton block, for example, for them could be nothing. It could be the equivalent of like a kilo. Why not? If that's what happened, right? Again, it's confusing, right? When you start looking at certain things, it's very confusing. But one thing I do understand is these cutting, how they were cutting the stones and how they were using some of the hardest stones that we have. I mean, these guys were using granite and whatnot, and some of the crazy stuff they're doing. In fact, I think again, going back to Egypt, there's this one particular pyramid, or not the pyramid, there's a pyramid complex, but around there, they have these sarcophagi or whatever they call it, right? So apparently they were burying bulls or whatever for whatever reason, because the bull gods. But there's something that's mind-boggling, right? One of the biggest thing is how did they get the boxes in there, right? These granite, box with a lid, whatnot. They weigh hundreds of tons. How did they get it there? That's the question, right? Because the space is not big enough. So you got to wonder, it's like, how? And I am laughing, believe me, I am absolutely laughing about this, because it is so hilarious, right? So that's my thing on ancient civilization. I actually feel that yes, we are being lied to. We are definitely being lied to, and it could be just an innocent mistake, an innocent lie, right? That's because academics have been put in power to give us answers, because humanity is so lazy that they just want answers given to them. They don't want to discover. Well, why would I want to go and work for the answer when I've got people in establishments, that's the word I was looking for earlier on, establishments who can actually give me the answer? And then we're so dumb that we actually take that for granted, and this is the problem, right? So there are a lot of modern day academics who are disagreeing with the hypothesis and saying, well, hold on, the theories that you have presented to us, which mostly people think are facts, are actually not facts, because current technology gives us better data which indicate that the time frames that you have put on are actually incorrect, right? And these megalithic structures could actually go back further in time, right? So that's a good thing. So we are seeing signs and we are seeing arguments, but I'm just saying, look, I don't care which part of the world these ancient civilizations or lost civilizations came from. I don't think they're lost. Maybe we may have had some sort of a catastrophe. That's a different story. But I think that it is us, and that there is nothing, about some advanced technology or whatever, or Atlanteans or these random people who decided to be the smartest people in the world. No, I don't think it's any of these. I mean, put it this way: if I want to go really crazy, this is going to be one of the most craziest thing. I've got a feeling that, imagine humanity right? And this is my hypothesis, right? I'm about to kind of break away and go into insanity mode, right? What if humanity advanced so far with technology and knowledge that it decided to leave planet Earth? And I mean, imagine that. Imagine this, right? Where the technology we were using was so clean, right? Was so advanced, or advanced for us because we are primitives, right? Because we only understand what is being taught to us, but was so advanced and was shared amongst everybody around this planet that we decided to build spaceships using that same technology, anti-gravity technology, whatever, and decide to move on. And you're going to say, well, hold on, that's crazy. No one's ever said that. Absolutely, no one's ever said that. But I'm going to say this because there's a reason behind this, right? So we get these ancient stories, and this is my theory. This is a complete theory, by the way, guys. There's nothing based on facts or anything, and there's no scientific evidence of what I'm saying, but it's just a theory because I want to think outside the box, right? And I say certain parts of civilization shared knowledge amongst each other and surpassed whatever we think right now, had the capability of flight, anti-gravity, you know, whatever. I'm not going to go into teleportation, right? Because I think that's a bit insanity. But imagine all of this, right? And they managed to even go to space, for example, or use their technology to, at least if not go to space, but travel around the world, you know, because what did man do when man created the first plane, right? The first flying plane that they had back in 1912, I think it was not the Wright brothers, right, when they had the flying plane. Since then, the first thing they did was send post, send cargo, XYZ, eventually, you know, taking people from one part to another. That's what they do, right? I mean, Elon Musk is thinking about taking people to Mars. Think about that, right? So that's what we do. When we start getting some sort of a new technology, we start using it for other activities, right? Or other beneficial things, right? So it could be making more money, whatever. So what if they traveled the world? And if they traveled the world and then you had these indigenous people, you know, these really uneducated people from, you know, little dark corners of the earth, or some forest or some mountain or whatever, where civilization just didn't reach because they're so far away that, you know, nobody really saw them, right? You know, or they just didn't mix with people. Well, what are these people going to think when they see someone flying and coming around and seeing them? Well, they're going to think they're gods. And you can see that we have myths of, you know, ancient gods from multiple religions and cultures, right? And I'm not going to even say religion because it's more to do with culture than religion. That in certain regions, they talk about how gods came descending down in flying objects or fiery chariots, right? Because they can only call it what it is. I mean, if before the word chariot was created, God only knows what they called something that moved, you know, or carried someone, right? So the point is language evolves and we have different words, right? So of course they didn't know they don't know the word plane didn't exist, or the aeroplane didn't exist, or spaceship didn't exist. But the point is they had flying chariots, right? So this is a modern word, I could say, because before that I'm sure it was something else. Anyway, so man is traveling from one part to another. Man decides to share technology. And when they start sharing technology with other civilizations and other parts of the world to bring them to their level, because remember, they're trying to share this technology, what would they think? They would think these guys are gods, because that's, you know, these guys are doing things that we can only imagine. And this is the same thing. Imagine this, right? We, right now, today, in 2022, right now, today, can only imagine that, you know, 12,000 years ago, as an average, 12,000 years ago, mankind would have technology, right? We can only imagine. We cannot believe or trust that, because how can man have technology superior than us today back then, right? And that's the thing. So you gotta flip this whole thing and say, well, what if the primitives, right, or the villagers, or whatever you want to call it, right, thought the same? And we do not have any of this. How are they flying? How do these guys descend down? They're coming down, they're teaching us stuff. And this is what the Sumerians wrote 6,500 years ago, how the Anunnaki came down and taught them X, Y, Z, right? But imagine this, right? Just imagine that the knowledge was given by ourselves, actual humanity, you know? But I'm not saying that mankind or humanity is all alone on this planet. No, I believe that we could have advanced to such a level that we surpass this, or probably we even predicted certain catastrophes like the Ice Age or whatever that is coming, or some asteroid or whatever coming, and by that time we had enough technology in order for us to leave this planet. So we could already be a multi-planetary civilization, which now modern science calls lost civilizations. But I don't think there's anything lost. You know, in my opinion, I actually doubt anything was ever lost. I think it's just we're multiplanetary. We've probably already left. So that's how I kind of put it. Obviously, KR mentioned something about Antarctica. Yes, once upon a time, based on the, I think it's Perry-Rees map, Antarctica was not covered in snow. It was actually quite tropical. And again, if you go scientifically, so scientifically they do talk about the Earth's crust shift or something like this. I forgot what it was called, but axis shift. So the Earth, the axis will shift a certain amount, and creating seasonal changes, right? So for example, a country which was always hot could now end up being cold, and so forth, right? And it happens every so and so many years, like every 26,000 years, or apparently. So when you have something like this, yeah, I think it's the polar shift. Yeah, polar shift. Sorry, it's late, and I'm tired, but I am going to talk about this, right? So they talk about the polar shift, right? So with the polar shift, now, if such situations do arise, and this is what science says that does happen, right? And so if this did happen, then we can, you know, surely say that Antarctica could have been hot, or could have been part, you know, somewhere around the equator at some stage in history, you know, because that's all we can talk about. So this is how I see certain things. So Antarctica, you know, and you know, are there holes and this and that? I'm not going to go into the hollow earth theory. Okay, it is fascinating, of course. I love listening to the hollow earth theory, how there's a whole different ecosystem, or how there are people within the center of the earth. Great. That does lead into many other conspiracies and many other theories. In fact, some of the theories about aliens living inside the, you know, beneath us, underground, and this and that. And that's a subject for another day. We can talk about that another day. Definitely, it's not to do with hollow earth, but it is to do with all the aliens. I will definitely talk about the aliens. And I have talked about it before as well. I think I briefly mentioned it once, how I think the aliens are so stupid. But that we can, as I said, talk on another day. I do believe in dimensions. And I don't think it has anything to do with technology. You know, dimensions, parallel dimensions. You know, I don't think it has anything to do with any other, any technology or anything like this. I don't think we need the technology for it. The way I think about it is very simple, right? If you look at, say, for example, paranormal, right? So we talk about paranormal stuff like ghosts, spirits, and this and that. I don't really believe in spirits. I believe when someone's dead, they're dead, they're gone. So what I believe is when you do see some sort of an entity, right? I'm going to call it an entity because that's the wide name. I believe you're actually viewing somebody from another dimension, and they've just peered through the veil, right? So that kind of stuff. But again, we can talk about it another day, because it is freaky, but at the same time, I'm quite fascinated. I'm like, well, hold on. Why would a dead person come back? Or why would their soul be hanging about? Shouldn't their soul go to one of three places, right? And one of three places for me is either hell, heaven, or purgatory, right? Very simple, right? You know, you can't really be in the same domain. And if you are, then there's something wrong. There's a fourth domain. So that then makes no sense to me, right? So you know, I'm not that religious, so yeah, I'm not going to go into that anyway. Now, moon landings, right? So so I'm going through the list, right? So KR mentioned something about moon landings, how the moon landings are fake. In the beginning, I do believe moon landings was fake, right? And I do completely agree with this. Moon landings was definitely fake for the first round. However, since then, plenty of other moon landings are 100% accurate, to the point where I believe that when they stopped going to the moon publicly, they never did. They actually continued with the black budget, or whatever you want to call it, a secret, whatever, you know. So they continued. That's what I believe, right? To the point where I believe that they've, you know, the governments, or I'm not sure which country, I'm not going to say that, but I believe that governments of the world have sent spacefaring astronauts, or whatever, even technology, maybe, I don't know, far beyond planet Earth. They've gone to the moon, they've gone to the Mars, you know, they've probably even explored other countries, or sorry, other planets where they could land. And everything else you're seeing, and all the other stuff you're seeing on the news, or all of these you know, new discoveries of new planets, or these G-type planets, or Goldilocks planets, right? They're just misleading, right? Have we made alien contact? I believe we have, but I don't think it's the way the government likes to say, or maybe the conspiracy theories like to say. And I know everyone's going to hate me for this one, right? And I was going to talk about this, but let me just drop this, right? For example, why does aliens have to come and visit us, or come and show some aircraft and you know, just flash and then vanish? Why do UFOs have to do any of this stuff? You're talking about a superior being, an alien from a distant planet, traveled light years, right? You know, maybe hundreds of light years, to come and visit you. And all they do is flash a few lights up in the sky and then they vanish. I don't think so. In my opinion, they're already here. They're probably part of the elite shadow governments. They're probably part of the unknown, right? The actual puppet masters, the people who govern the world, the people who control everything, right? They're probably there already. Now, I'm not going into the lizard people and this and that. I'm not going into that. But the point I'm trying to make here is, what if there are people in this planet who believe to be divine, or have some sort of a right to be divine, or maybe just super powerful, and they all have this, like, a birthright which goes back generations, thousands of years, and they form a group or a cult or something like this, and they could be descendants of alien you know, beings. Now, alien beings do not necessarily have to look anything different than us. They could literally look just like us, you know. There are stories out there where they talk about inbreeding and this and that, like, you know, multi-different, you know, hybrids and whatnot. I'm not even going to go there. Those are different stuff. I will talk about it on another day. But the point I'm trying to make here is, if they did exist, they're already here. They don't need to flash their lights. Think about it, you know. And if they did flash their lights, well, they're not going to be looking for, oh, let's see who the leaders are of this country, or they go to a specific country, look for the leaders of the world, and then try and talk to them directly. I mean, seriously, what do you think this is, Star Trek? No, this is not Star Trek. Reality is, if an alien civilization came to visit us from a distant planet, they wouldn't go looking for the leaders. They would land wherever, and they would demand the leaders come and see them. Think about that. So yeah, other than that, guys, I'm not going to make this any longer because I can make this go crazy. But I hope some of this kind of makes sense, right? When I look at ancient civilizations, when I look at history itself, I think it's an innocent lie. They really don't know what they're talking about. And some of the times when they publish certain things, they really don't want to redact or take it back. because they just don't want to be wrong. And also people who have written some of the stuff have well passed away, and history has just repeated it so many times that it's become something of a fact, but it's not a fact, right? It's still a theory, and it's not proven. So this all leads for me to say one thing, that when I start looking at architecture and seeing that different parts of the world, how these buildings are built on certain areas, specific areas, how they point to certain stars, how they have certain shapes, the craftsmanship that is involved, this does not suggest to me that we had these mad, crazy leaders, rulers, kings or whatever you want to call them, who decided to build these pyramid structures for absolutely nothing. Just a monument for absolutely nothing, or whatever the current science, modern day science, tells us that they were built as tombs. I don't think so, because there's nothing there. But if you start looking at them, and if you start looking at the different time frames that the science gives us, it doesn't make any sense. What makes more sense is these people were the same people. And if these people were the same people, then they would have had to exist in the same time frame. So that's all I'm going to say. And that's what I believe. So, yes, we are being lied to, but it's an innocent lie. And ancient civilizations that have existed, for us right now, it's very hard to believe that they could have had technology or knowledge, right? Far superior to us. So it is very, very hard. As I said, it will be like, how is it possible? It's not. These are people from Stone Age, but that's because you believe people from the Stone Age are, just beating up stones and doing whatnot, or putting rocks together and making fire. It's not true. There's no fact to say this. Whatever evidence you've been given is just a hypothesis. There's no evidence saying mankind did not last, or mankind did not have a powerful civilization before some of the big catastrophes that we've had. But one has to just look at himself and say, what would you do if you were a leader of a country or a nation? What would you do? What did some of the biggest leaders do? Did they build monuments for themselves, or was it something else? The only one that I do know of was the first emperor of China. He did build a monument to himself, but with terracotta. So one's got to ask themselves. Anyways, I'm not going to make this any longer. Thank you very much if you have watched it or listened right up to here. I opened up a Bitcoin chart and I started talking about ancient civilizations. Now, while we're on the Bitcoin subject, I want to show you something. So what I want to show you is this particular zone here, right? So this is on a weekly. If you have stayed until this long, thank you very much. So this is on a weekly. What you can see is we have this 21-week moving average, right? And this red line is the 50-week moving average. Now, what I'm looking for is this particular area here. This is actually our current resistance, which is around the 22,000, right? And if you do look carefully, then this is our zone. So what I'm looking is this particular zone where we could see a nice little invalidation. However, if we are going to see any positive movements, now we could come here and be rejected, which is not so positive, but it's okay. It's not that bad as long as we are, moving in a trend, which is absolutely fine, right? However, if we are going to do these, every week without actually going to 22, and we're constantly doing these higher lows, it's actually brilliant for us. It's actually brilliant for us. Now, I know there are some hypotheses out there where, some predictions out there who are saying that, look, if you start looking at these weekly stuff, you can turn around and say, well, look, we're getting to a point where we're getting this W pattern come up, right? So we're getting this W show up, right? Which is okay. Or possibly we might even have a double bottom, right? So which is basically going like this, coming here, doing this, and then having another bottom, and then shooting up. Now, whatever the case is, I'm personally not looking at any of this stuff. For me, the most important thing that I have to look at is actually just this stochastic RSI, right? So let me get that. Give me a second. this stochastic RSI. This is the most important thing for me. So what I'm looking at is RSI and stochastic RSI. RSI right now is in the perfect zone, pointing up, right? So you can see the yellow pointing up, right, which is coming into the zone, because as soon as it does come here, we're going to start shooting up, and that's the start of a bull run, right? So everything else that was there was bearish. Right now, what we're seeing is definitely bullish. So this is indicating bullish. This I'm not too concerned about, because this is on a weekly. This could easily change, go up or down. We are going to see the parabolic moves later on, right? When the parabolic moves comes, we will see something similar to this shape. But again, this doesn't happen over one day. As you can see, this is weeks and weeks, months and months when this particular thing happens. So right now, this is only indicating, so the stochastic RSI is only indicating volatility in the past few weeks. However, the RSI is definitely pointing a trend. So we already know this. So this is what I'm focusing mostly on. I'm not bothered about what happens on the candles, because candles will only relate later what this is already indicating right now. So this is showing us the current strength in the market, the current sentiment in the market, if that makes any sense, right? So the sentiment is positive, is creeping up very slow. We're not going to see anything just shoot up straight away, but this gives me enough indication that whatever I've bought up to now is secure and is safe, that there's a possibility we may not go up. All right, so we may not go down. So that's what I'm looking at. I know people are calling for the 10K, the 4K, the 3K, whatever. For me, I'm just not going to go down there. I don't think it's possible. And if it is, absolutely okay with me, right? That's more discounts for us. Now, one thing KR did ask me, and this is funny, KR asked me recently, he said, what kind of a time frame do we have for this thing to start becoming bullish or whatever? What's the time frame? He wanted to some time. There's only one time I can show you, right? And this time is actually here. So if I do put it around here, so you can see February 2023, right? So 13th February 2023. Now 13th is not an accurate date, it could be the 14th, right? So let's just, because it's on a weekly, so let's put it that way. So it could be on the 13th or the 14th. I would say 14th is much more likely, maybe even the 15th, right? Where we can see the trend itself completely reversing and a bull confirmation. So we will see a confirmation around the 13th of February. So remember this is a confirmation. This is not the thing. So far, the start of the bull run has already started, as we hypothesize, as we kind of predict, or whatever you want to call it, right? So the projection we have is that we are right now at the start of a bull run. This is that same moment in 2019 that we had, right? Which was here in 2019. We had this same moment around here. You can see this particular area here. Let me just show you this area here, 2019, right? So this is what I'm seeing right now here forming as well. So this is similar to 2019, this particular area here. So for me, this is all indicating that the time is here now. We have hit the bottom. It doesn't matter if we go down a little bit. I've mentioned this before as well. Even if we do dip down to, say, for example, 10K or anything low, it doesn't matter, because it will only be a brief moment thing. What matters is, in the greater scope, is we are now trending up, and we're not going to go down at those levels anymore. So if we're starting to trend up, the next level should start taking us up. Now, I have spoken, or I've kind of left a message on Discord about this, that if we do see a high, then I'm expecting a 300% from here, right? So 300% from here. One could say 60, others could say 66,000, others could say 63,000, whatever you want to call it, but it's within that range, right? The 60 to 66,000 range. But I've also mentioned that we could also potentially see a 500% from here, right? Now, 500% from here, I said take it with a pinch of salt, because that may not come right now. However, by 2024, or probably end of 2024, I do see a probability, a likelihood of this coming. Now, why do I see this coming? Is because it's all of the news as well. We are in a recession. Whether they admit it or not, we are in a recession. We are definitely seeing inflation going out of control. They're doing everything to control inflation. Now, as we are in a recession, it only means one thing, that there will be an end of a recession. And a recession normally doesn't last for years and years and decades and decades. It's pretty rare. If one did happen, you need some sort of a massive catastrophe for this to happen. Usually it's brought into control within a few years, and then we start seeing an uptrend again. And I feel that as we have been creeping into a recession over the past couple of years, we are going to see signs of coming out of a recession by 2023, 2024. And that kind of correlates with the next bull run. Now, bull run, I'm not even talking about crypto because that would be me being biased. I'm talking about the entire financial systems, and I'm including crypto in the financial system, to say we will see a recovery, whatever it takes, whatever kind of a reset it takes. We are going to see that, and when we do, we will see the markets pump again. When people are confident, right? So we need confidence back in the market. We will see these markets move. And when they do move, we could see massive gains. But again, take it with a pinch of salt, okay? It's very important. Take it with a pinch of salt. But so far, for me, like, you know, the way I see certain things is that, look, we're now at the precipice where we're right now at the levels that we should be, and I feel that this is it, you know, because we've only got 2 levels to confirm. Level 1, we need to break this particular resistance, and level 2, we need to break this resistance. Once we break this top resistance, there's no stopping us. You know, I know people are talking about how we could go all the way up to 25k. Yeah, we've got to break 24 to get to 25. I know people are talking about how we could get to 10. Yes, we could, right? But 10 is now looking a lot less unlikely than it was before. You know, I've heard people talking about calling 14k. I don't think so. I think mostly if we did come back down again, we might go and test that $17,500 level again. You know, I don't think we're going to break that. I think that's where we're going to be holding, because this is a decent price. You know, I know people want cheap BTC. I want cheap BTC. I mean, if people can give me BTC for $1, I'll take it any day. But that's not the fair price. And everybody is willing to pay a fair price, right? Apart from some of the newbies probably. But the point is we're willing to pay a fair price. And the fair price right now would be 17.5 to the $20,000 level. That's a fair price for BTC. So I hope this kind of makes sense. I don't like to put dates, but I did put a date there. And let's see where it goes, but don't hold me to that date. This is just me being me on a video while I'm going home, and while I was talking about ancient civilizations. So I hope this crazy video of mine makes some sense, and I hope I didn't offend anybody. If I did, I apologize. This video is not any financial advice, obviously, for the crypto stuff, and it's not a scientific advice for anybody. It's just a way of me talking to you and telling you how I like to think outside the box. You know, it's not for education purposes or anything, but I just like to think outside the box, and I like to question everything. What if? Why not? You know, why isn't it possible? So I like to kind of stretch the possibilities and say, well, if this is possible, then that is possible. If we are sitting right now, you know, say 20 years ago, we didn't have certain technologies and we have it now. Well, why can't man have technology thousands of years ago that we don't have now either? Or technology that we are not going to see for another 100 years, right? Or maybe another 1,000 years. So that's how I like to think. It's like question everything. And so this is what you get. So other than that, guys, like, share, subscribe, and I hope to catch you another one. I hope I didn't offend anybody, and I hope you don't think I'm insane. And if you did, then awesome, because I am insane. Take care. Adios, my amigos.